This is the Wise Guy Radio Show, a podcast dedicated to educating and inspiring through conversations with today's top talents in the world of glass. We will be dissecting their journeys in hopes to deliver actionable content that you, the artist, can start implementing now, helping you grow not only as a creative spirit, but also a successful artistic entrepreneur. With a little organization, relationship building, and your artistic ability, you can obtain greatness. Climb aboard, whether an artist, retail owner, or enthusiast. We have a ton of fun in store for you. Welcome to the Wise Guy Radio Show. Really implement, or I should say, instrumental into educating the glass community with his contemporary lampworking books that he came out with, volumes 1 through 3. If you are not familiar with these books, they are books that I recommend and that you should have as a requirement in your studio for references. We get into a lot of talk about the concepts of studying and reading and kind of preparing yourself for glass before you even get on the torch. He has a shit ton of wealth of information. He has spent hours upon hours studying books in the Corning Museum and libraries up at Pilchuck and teaching everything. And we get into a lot of good talk about all this stuff and his philosophies and his journeys as well, starting off as a young kid, getting into his kinetic work and steam engines and marble tracks, and now he's into the functional scene. He actually even said how he made a pipe in the 70s. So, it was just something. He's somebody I've wanted to get on the show for a long time, since even preconception for this podcast, and just thrilled to have him on. So can't thank him enough to come on here, and I really hope you enjoy this conversation. He has some classes coming up this weekend, and I'm recording this now a week ahead of this show actually coming out, so that doesn't matter. But you can definitely keep in touch with Bandhu online through his website and social media and what have you. And I'll have all the links in the show notes for that as well. And he's on Instagram, he's on Facebook, and he also has 2 different websites, one for his quote-unquote art and one for his quote-unquote functional art. So it's pretty cool, fun stuff. His website for his pipes is zorplex.com. And at the end of the interview, you'll hear... I asked him, what the hell does that mean? And he tells us all about it. It's XORPLEX.com. You can definitely check that out and get an idea of what he's doing in the functional world. Not something he does all the time, but he definitely enjoys doing it and expanding his world of glass. So enjoy this conversation for sure. I had a blast, and I know you will too. Right now we are in the middle of the Tournament of Fire, which I'm super excited about. Kids up there at Cherry Glass have been putting this on. This is the 3rd round. And we're getting into this week. We're starting round 2. This, again, I'm recording this a week ahead, so the voting for round 1 is going to be this upcoming weekend. And when this airs, round 2 will have started. So hopefully I am in round 2. We will find out. But this is a 4-round competition, and then the winner, who is the grand prize winner per se of round 4, will then go to the finals to compete against the artist who won round 1 and round 2. And it's pretty cool stuff. As we him and I talked about it in our last interview, talking about that stuff with Scott over at Cherry Glass. And what else here? You know, we got our Mountain Glass sales going on. As you know, you go check out your Mountain Glass sales. They got 2 borosilicate sales going on right now. They have their soft glass sale for all my beautiful soft glass nerds out there. Don't forget also, if you are brand new into glass art and want to get a kit for yourself, you can put in the code WISEGUY at checkout, and you'll receive 10% off your order on any kit that you buy through Mountain Glass. I keep forgetting to mention that, but that's definitely something you guys should check out. And the kits that they have, even though they have the kits set up, you can interchange tools and what have you. It does alter the price a smidge, but that being said, don't forget about that Wise Guy sale they have going on all the time. 10% off a kit. It's not 10% off your order. It's just 10% off a kit. So definitely take advantage of that. And the Flow Magazine as well. The Flow Magazine. Go to flowmagazine.com. As I just said their name 3 times. But you can go there and subscribe to their magazine if you have not yet done that, and I highly suggest it. It's a quarterly magazine, and they do an amazing job. They've been around for a long time. They are another one of the publications in our community that has been very, very instrumental into the educational space and helping things out, which I really appreciate. And, you know, just thinking here right now. Oh, before I forget, let me finish this up. to get your subscription, and you go to flowmagazine.com and use the code WISEGUY at checkout, and you'll get 10% off a subscription. And again, I highly recommend it if you have not yet subscribed to this magazine. My dumbass never subscribed to it, and I am now a subscriber, and I shoot myself in the foot, or whatever that is. I'm my brain's a little fried right now. I've done 2 interviews today and blah, blah, blah. So, but yeah, theflowmagazine.com. Use the code WISEGUY at checkout for 10% off their magazine. And we got Glassroots coming up here in October, the 9th and 10th. I cannot wait to get up there and see all your faces. For those that are going to be going, the classes are offering. It's going to be an amazing time. We had our interview 169 with Nick again, kind of a follow-up on what's coming up here with Glassroots Trade Show. And it's exciting times in that trade show in particular, as we have thousands of trade shows now, it seems like. And I'm exaggerating. It's not really true. We don't have thousands, but it feels like it at times. Making a little joke here about it. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this last week's interview with Nick. And one thing I wanted to talk about real quick, which I kept getting these little brain farts with Bandhu because I have so many questions for him. And most of them I wrote down, but this one I didn't write down. And there was a reference he had made in regarding to rotation of punty or your point or your glass rod, whatever you're spinning in the flame. And something he had brought up was the speed of your rotation. And there's so many times, like back in the day when I was doing a lot of the production stuff, I was just like in production mode, and my hands rotating my glass as fast as I possibly could in the heat, thinking that the faster I move my hand, the more surface area I'm heating up, the faster the glass is going to soften up and I can shape my shit out. But really all I was doing was wearing myself out, giving myself carpal tunnel a lot faster. And his whole philosophy and perspective, I heard him say on a thing one day, was it's all about consistency. It isn't about how fast you rotate your hand. It's because rotating your hand too fast is going to wear you out. I've gotten to a point now where I don't even really do a full rotation in the flame anymore. I do more of a rocking back and forth mechanism where I'll roll the glass to the right, say 380 degrees, and then I roll it back to my left, 380 degrees. Now, there are times where I do rotate the glass, don't get me wrong, but thinking about that philosophy and concept is you don't need to spin that glass that fast. Actually, spin the glass faster in the flame not only moves the glass on you, it also just wears you the hell out. And if you're going to try to spend a 10-hour day in your studio cranking out a shit ton of production, you got to just take it as a marathon, and it's not a sprint, the whole concept. So think about that next time you got your hands on some glass and you're in your flame and you're going 1,000 miles an hour because you've had 4 cups of coffee. Slow the hell down. Just slow down. Take your time. Be mindful of what you're doing. Pay attention to your glass, to your flame properties and chemistry, and just slow down. That's all you got to do. Just slow down. So on that rant and that note, and that's being done, as you all know, we are in the middle of summertime. If you're listening to this now, if you're listening to this in December, it will not be summertime. Well, it'll be summertime here in Florida still, but everywhere else around the world or country-wise, it won't be. And if you're in an area that is hot and you're sweating and you need to stay hydrated, make sure you are drinking plenty of fluids. You can add a little bit of pinch of salt into your water as well as some lemon in there, and it'll help keep you hydrated. The salt just replenishes all the stuff that you lose in your sweat and the sodium and all the electrolytes and stuff. It helps maintain that. And then a little bit of lemon in there. It helps with all the alkaline and acidic levels in your body and bloodstream. It really keeps everything flowing, keeps your metabolism up, and keeps you hydrated. Something about the absorption rate increases when you add a little bit of pinch of some Himalayan sea salt and that lemon into your water. It helps the absorption rate in your body more so. That way you're not just peeing it out. That being said, if you're working a full day and you're realizing that you haven't really used the bathroom at all that day, or maybe once in the entire day, it means that you're dehydrated. If you notice that, it's because you're sweating so much. I mean, literally, we sweat, and it's more or less, it's gross, but it's like we're sweating out urine. And think about that kind of stuff, because you can get to a point where you get heat exhaustion, or it just wears you out, and it wears out your cellular level in your body, which then depletes your energy levels, which then makes your glass less efficient, and you want to stop working and just go sit on the couch and cool down. So stay hydrated. Work in 3-hour increments like I've talked about before in the past, and every 3 hours take a little break, refill your water, use the bathroom, take a phone call, do emails, cool off a little bit, and then go back out there and get back into it again. And I say 3 hours because it usually takes an hour to warm up, an hour for your flow state, and then an hour to cool down, if that makes any sense. So Enough of my ranting and raving here. We are still doing our little pendant giveaway. So if you want to get one of my pendants from me, I have 5 left. Just send me an email with a snap of your stuff you left on iTunes or whatever podcast catcher you use if you want to leave a review, or also on social media, especially on Instagram. All you have to do on Instagram is do a post of any of your favorite episodes. You can do a screenshot of you listening to on your screen of your phone. Whatever episode you're listening to, do a screenshot, post it up on your Instagram. Tell the community that you have following you why you listen to the show and what about it that you like about it. Give us some love and tag at wiseguy_radio on that. And then on the iTunes, if you have an iPhone or if you go onto the internet and go to iTunes, you can leave a review. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I needed to move around and move some carbon dioxide out of my lungs. Go to iTunes, leave a review, whether written or a 5-star or both would be amazing. And then do a screenshot, send me an email, wiseguymedia@gmail.com. On Instagram, just tag me at wiseguyradio, wiseguy_radio, and then send me a DM if you want on there, or you can send me an email with a screenshot. And if you do both, I will send you 2 pendants because you deserve it because you did both things, and I'm super appreciative of you. And again, I've got 5 left. So the first 5 folks to leave a new review and post on their Instagram will get these pendants and go from there with it. And anything else, I don't know. If I miss something, I apologize. But I'm going to get out of here. So, again, enjoy this amazing chat and educational talk with Bandhu Scott Dunham. And we'll talk to you next time on the Rise Guy Radio Show. Love you so much. Thanks for tuning in. And we will talk to you soon. Take it easy. Peace. Peace.
Man's inhumanity to man, all those things cause complication in creation. Saying the domination of one nation to another nation, all those things cause complication. See?
Hey, what's up, Bandhu? Welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks a lot, Jason.
Yeah, man, no problem, bro. So as we talked pre-show, when I first did this write-up for this podcast and trying to figure out how to go about it and artists I want to bring on, I made a list of 10 artists, and you were in that top 10. And as I sat to think about the actual reality of doing once a week, and there's 52 weeks in a year, and I'm like, well, shit, I could probably do 10 years with the podcast episodes with all these artists we have now. And
yeah.
But you're still, to me, in my realm of world and space, you're still in like my top 5 that I have in terms of artists I look up to. Not only for the educational space and how you've really made an impact in our community, but also just your glass and your technique and how you're inspired and stuff, which I really want to get into all that. But before we get too off topic and what have you, if you want to get us started off by telling us your superhero origin story and how you got started blowing glass.
Well, I got into glass because I was a pretty nerdy kid, and I had a fairly extensive chemistry lab in my parents' basement because I really wanted to be a mad scientist when I was a kid. And back then you could actually do like a chemistry lab in your basement. Like you could get the stuff, tools and supplies and chemicals, and they would actually sell things to you, and hobby stores had cool things. But anyway, a lot of the like the books and the chemistry sets you would get, they'd have a little bit of glass blowing in there. They'd have like a glass tube, show you how to bend a glass tube to make a wash bottle or something. And I was trying that out. I thought it was pretty cool. And I thought if I learned to blow glass, that I could make more crazy chemical apparatus so that I could be more like Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And that was really my initial motivation when I was like 14, 15. And I went to the library and found a couple of books actually on glass blowing in our county library and just started teaching myself, trying stuff out. And because there weren't really, back then, people wouldn't teach you so much unless you directly apprenticed with someone and you had to like be in a glass blowing family, or, marry into the family or something. So I got some books and just started experimenting, teaching myself. I actually learned more stuff about color and so on from furnace glass blowers that I would see at craft fairs. But I started teaching myself, and eventually the glass took over more than the chemistry. I went to college for chemical engineering, but then dropped out after a while in order to pursue the glass full time.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting with the chemistry set. My grandfather, when he was a kid, he had a very similar thing. He had the chemistry set, and I don't know how in the hell it survived for whatever. He passed away when he was 82, but he still had the entire kit, the box, everything, the styrofoam that it came in. And he passed it on to me. I got it in the will, and I still have it still had the little Pyrex glass rods in it. It had a small, I'd say probably like a 3-inch diameter small beaker in it, and didn't have any of the powders or any of the chemicals and stuff, but all the tweezers and all the tools and stuff were in there, and this little kid on the cover, with his little lab coat on, like, hey, look at me. I mean, you can't even imagine that kind of shit nowadays with the way our political, and everybody's like, oh, protect all of our kids and blah, blah, blah. I couldn't even imagine that nowadays.
And it probably is for the best, because I remember I dumped some pretty sketchy stuff down the sink and down the toilet, and made some combination of things that weren't that great. But, I don't know. I think it's a lot more interesting than just doing micro experiments on a porcelain plate or something like they do nowadays.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I would have been as inspired without the romance of the whole Dr. Frankenstein thing. But anyway, it led me to doing glass. And now, now that I'm doing these kinetic sculptures out of glass, it is a lot like being a mad scientist. So it's kind of like I've gotten my childhood wish come true.
Nice. Heck yeah. I get so many over at Disney where I work, and I get a lot of teachers that come in that are lab science teachers and stuff, and or we're students that did lab classes, and they're always bringing up the Bunsen burner and melting some glass or bending a rod, kind of thing. Yeah. So they're always intrigued and bringing their classes in to see us working. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so when you first started doing your stuff, so what was some of the first items you were making when you were really first getting into the glass?
Well, I was doing glass animals. Actually, I did do a couple pipes back in high school when I was starting off, but it wasn't even borosilicate glass. It was just some soda lime glass tubing. So they weren't very durable. They were just very simple. Yeah. Nothing anything to write home about. But I was doing glass animals because there was a tradition of doing glass animals, and I found a couple of local stores that would take some, and started doing a few local craft fairs, and then it just kind of expanded and built it up into a small business doing animals. We don't do a lot of animals anymore in my shop. We do some, but we do a lot of ornaments, Christmas ornaments. So we're coming up to a busy time of year for us right now.
Yeah, ornament time.
And then I do some pipes, and I do my kinetic sculptures.
Nice. What when you're doing the animals, are they hollow or are they solid?
They were mostly solid. Okay. Some hollow ones. We did little pregnant pigs. You've probably seen those. Sure, at the Disney scene, you see some of that kind of stuff.
Did you guys put dice inside of them and stuff?
We'd made a little. We didn't do dice. We did pigs with a little baby pig inside.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So we called those pregnant pigs. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen the pigs like that had they would put dice inside of them, little tiny dice.
Oh yeah, that cool.
It's been years. I don't know where I saw those things, but as a kid.
Yeah, and there's little tricks you do, the glass blower tricks, like you put a penny in a bottle or seal a match inside a glass tube, that kind of stuff. It's
Heck
fun.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's always funny too, because whenever I see that stuff and I know how glass works, if once you seal off glass and if it's soft, it's going to want to implode on itself. So I was always intrigued by seeing, the process, even doing a ship in a bottle, especially nowadays, seeing glass ships in bottles. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing how that's done nowadays. But back then I was just like, wow, this is magic.
Right. Yeah, well, yeah. Just seeing glass blown at all is magic. So if you can make objects that are mysterious to people, that adds to the whole mystique of it.
Yeah. Especially when you know what's going on, and then you're still like, how in the hell did they do that? It's like, Jesus.
Yeah.
It's neat. Yeah, and that's why I love your work, because your work's always been very intriguing to me. Some of it's chaotic and some of it's not so chaotic, but it's always some kind of function it serves, whether it's just to make you smile or it actually functions like a steam engine.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So from that point on, so you're saying ornaments and doing the steam engines and stuff like that right now was the initial inspiration to get into the steam engines just something, going back to your childhood, or was there something that you saw that made you want to get into that?
Well, there was definitely a connection to the whole mad scientist thing of childhood, but I learned about the glass steam engines. There had actually been some made in the 1800s, like the 1850s. So when I was working on, I guess, the second edition of my books, when I was researching the history, I learned that there had been these glass steam engines, and I saw pictures of some of them, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. So I found out a little bit more about them at the Corning at the library at the Corning Museum of Glass, the Raykow Library. They had a lot of information on them, and so I thought I had to try one out, and I did a little bit more experimentation and research. The first couple I tried out were pretty funky and didn't really function very well. And then I went down to Florida to saw the Excelsior that's at the Leitner Museum down there in St. Augustine, and that helped me figure out how to make the valve system work.
Okay.
Because that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was able to make a couple. I've done, I don't know, half a dozen or 10 steam engines since then. It's been a little while since I've made one, so I'm working on one as a prototype for this class that I'm teaching coming up. And it's fun to get back into it, all the detailed parts and the geometry that has to line up.
Do you find that when you revisit these kind of things that you have a better perspective on how to assemble or how to, like, what the approach to it's going to be?
Yeah, every time I do one, I get little ideas of how to improve it. I'm playing around with the valve this time. Haven't put the whole thing together yet to see how well it works, but I think I have a little system for the valve that's going to make the valve run more efficiently and consistently.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes an issue on these.
Have you done
my engineering?
Just go.
I was just going to say my engineering of the steam engines is pretty funky. I actually think it's kind of cool if they're leaking a little bit of steam, and they have this adds to the romance of them. You hear that puffing sound and stuff. So they're not really engineered to be super exactly precise. If they keep going and turn over, that's pretty good as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it brings me back to, like, my childhood, even still as an adult. But I love trains and the old steam engine trains and stuff. And, and the how those things function. Like over at Disney, we have the steam engines there, and they literally blow off their steam about every hour or so just to help relieve some of the pressure in the engines. And it's amazing the amount of steam that comes out. I mean, it's not loud, but it's amazing how much steam they have to release as that thing builds up. It's fascinating. And so the liquid that you're using, are you using just regular water, or is it something else that's in there?
Yeah, I like distilled water so it doesn't build up stuff in the boiler.
Right.
It's distilled when it's inside the engine anyway, because it starts as steam, so it's pretty pure. But I had to experiment with a bunch of different boilers until I found something I like. And lately, what I use, they're steam wallpaper removers. So it's got this cool little boiler, and then I just clip off the wallpaper removing part and modify the end of the hose, which of course avoids the warranty probably, but it makes it so I can connect it to the engine. And it's a great little steam source. It shuts itself off automatically if the water runs out. It's pretty safe. So I use that as my steam source, and then just plain water.
Yeah, it makes sense, because if you have like a lime buildup or something like that, you're gonna literally have like cholesterol and plaque buildup in the tubes, like your freaking arteries in your heart and stuff.
Yeah, you won't get that in the engine so much in the engine itself, but you'll get it in the boiler.
Yeah, it's smart, because I thought I had seen somebody else that was using like something else they were using in as their water source or something. I don't remember what it was. And I don't know if it was a video you did. I saw somebody take a piece of paper, like a flash paper type of stuff, and that was like their heat source. And as soon as the paper obviously stopped burning, the bubbling stopped. But it was some kind of accelerant they used to get it going.
It must have been, maybe you could make one with, like those little hand boiler things where it's like ether or something inside there.
Yeah.
You might be able to configure something that way. I've never tried that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Because I know that combustibility, you got to deal with certain issues with heat and whatever. But it's also the same thing as a chemistry lab that's going to be doing their own little distilling per se. And it's the same kind of setup. It's just you have yours connected to a machine that works.
Yeah,
it's pretty wild. Have you done any kind of vehicles or anything like that?
I haven't made any vehicles myself. Although in my research, I read something that said somebody had made a working model locomotive that went around on a little track, 8-foot diameter, that was a glass steam engine. And that sounds pretty crazy. I haven't gotten far enough to try that yet, to make one that would actually run a little vehicle. I'm not sure how you'd make it that small.
Yeah, and I want to say I've seen it, but I'm Googling right now. I want to say I've seen somebody that did a little glass car, like a little stock car, and it had on the back where the engine would be mounted was where the little plug would go in to keep the steam from coming out, kind of deal.
Yeah, maybe it may have been done more recently too. I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, man, these kids nowadays, you never know.
They're going crazy. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to me the way glass has evolved. When I was learning, like I said, there weren't a lot of people who would teach you. There's what they called the glass curtain. A lot of people kept their information secret because they were afraid if they taught you how to make like their little glass unicorn or something, that you would then copy their unicorns and drive them out of business. And it was a little bit paranoid. I mean, the same thing happens now in the pipe world with people biting on other people's designs, but there's a lot of room for creativity. And it really doesn't help the field grow if everyone's too paranoid. So back when I started, there weren't a lot of people who would teach you. I studied from books and practiced and tried things out. And, eventually things started making sense. And then when I was in college, the university glassblower let me set up in a corner of his shop. So I learned some stuff from him too that was pretty cool. That's when I started working with Boro, because that's what he used all the time. And I kept on making animals and stuff for a while, and then took classes at places like Pilchuck and Urban Glass in New York, and started developing a bigger artistic sense of glass, not just within the world of lampwork glass, but in the bigger glass world. And that sort of informed the things that I was trying to do. So the steam engines and stuff, I see those as really intersecting with a larger glass world that isn't specifically about lampworked glass, but they make some statements that are relevant for the bigger glass world too. I think in terms of audience engagement and playfulness and the transformation of energy and forces. That's kind of what they're about for me.
Yeah. Well, and that's another reason, bring you on the show is your work covers a broad spectrum of all kind of fun stuff, and like I said before, from the functionals to the seams to the kinetic and all kind of stuff. And I really preach on this show. It's like there's nothing worse than just being like, hey, I'm gonna go out there and start making rigs. It's like, why don't you learn how to use your medium, and then you can make whatever the hell you want to make. And you're a great example for why it's so important to understand how a glass moves. And like myself personally right now, I've got about 4 months now of assisting in the hot shop over at the Magic Kingdom. And man, cool. I'll tell you, I have learned, like you're saying about learning color from the hot shop guys, like I have learned so much more about just glass flow and color application and how some colors don't work with others and heat base and all this stuff. I thought that I knew what the hell I was doing, and then I started doing this hot shop stuff, and I'm really finding like my hand techniques are improving even more so, which, not being, overly confident myself here, but I feel like my sculptural techniques, hollow blown glass on the torch it's for me, I feel really good about it. And then I go to the hot shop and try to do the similar things there, and I make a mess, but I can take that technique when I'm learning and go back to my torch with it. And it's weird, man. Like when I first started doing it, I would do hot shop for 3 days, and then I would go 2 more days and do the torch work, and it literally would take me a day and a half to get back in my groove to work in the Boro. And it was probably about 2.5 months of going through that transition to where I finally felt comfortable enough where I can just go right from hot shop to my torch and really just keep that groove going. But it took me a little bit of time to get my brain wrapped around the concept of it.
Yeah, it's really good to be able to go between different types of glass, because it forces you to sort of understand what's really the nature of glass, even though there's different types. Like soft glass, like they're using in the hot shop, it's so crazy the way it stays soft sort of forever compared to Boro. And because everything's on a larger scale, the mass of it's kind of holding the heat longer too, so it works differently for that reason as well. And it just informs everything else that you're doing with glass. I think it makes other things make sense in a different way.
Yeah, I think one thing I enjoy about it too is when in the hot shop, because your blowpipes are hold a lot of your weight, and like I'm making ornaments, for instance, I really have no idea how thick or heavy or the mass of consistency in these ornaments I'm making because of the weight of the blowpipe. And then I go to pull it out of the kiln the next day, and I'm like, wow, this thing is way heavier than I thought it was going to be, or it's way lighter. And I could hold up two ornaments next to each other. They look like they had the same gather, the same process, the same everything, and they are totally, I mean, they're like a pound difference in weight-wise. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so weird how that is. But then again, you know, the color variables and understanding even more so how important understanding COE alone in glass and the coefficients of expansion and all that kind of stuff. It's like, I love it. And for me, being a nerd myself and loving science and loving engineering and loving architecture is, again, why I'm drawn to glass blowing and this whole thing, and also why I'm drawn to your work. For me, it's like I can do all kind of the things I've always wanted to do between I draw blueprints for all my glass that I make. I really design everything out. Like I go through this whole spectrum of things that I've wanted to do since I was a kid, except for be a weatherman. That's like one thing I still want to do one day. But, you know, and I can take all that stuff and put it into one piece of work. It's really fascinating and so, what's the word I'm looking for? Enjoyable, satisfying, you know, when it comes down to it. Even if it breaks, just the process.
Yep, glass is pretty amazing stuff. It can do everything, really. Glass can be, it can be used for anything almost.
Yeah, absolutely. So going from did the steam engines come before your marble tracks?
Kind of at the same time, actually. I wanted to, when I was a kid, we used to go to the beach and make pile up some sand and carve tunnels with with a soup spoon to run golf balls through. And that was kind of an early version of marble tracks that we would do when I was a kid. And when I first wanted to make a steam engine, I thought, well, I should have the steam engine power something, not realizing that, they weren't going to have all that much torque. So I thought I'd make a marble machine and link the steam engine to the marble machine. And that never really happened, but that's about the time I started making the marble machines too.
Huh. So did you start off, because I mean, man, your marble tracks, brother, they are amazing. It's like the craziest fucking roller coaster kind of setup you could ever imagine. It's like
Some of them get kind of elaborate, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you have like 4 or 5 tracks going on at one time, and the way the elevator works and the whole 9 yards. So like, when you started kind of thinking about the engineering process of these, did you see anybody else out there doing these type of things that you kind of emulated and kind of followed on, like the same thing with the steam engine?
Well, not out of glass. There have always been people making marble machines out of metal or wood or whatever. So I do draw some inspiration from those guys in terms of clever little mechanisms and stuff. But the way glass works is real different than the way that metal or wood works. So you have to kind of design things in a way that's going to be compatible with what the material calls for. So, I just started playing around with it. And there was actually, I think it was in 96 maybe, at the Glass Art Society conference in Tucson, when there were a bunch of us lamp workers there. There was me and Brian Kirkfleet, and Ricky Dodson was there, and Kevin O'Grady, and a couple other people. I don't remember who all was there, but we made a sort of a marble run thing. It was pretty funky. It was basically a giant funnel and then led into a little track. So that may have been the first glass marble run that we made. But there weren't really people pursuing it at that point. So when I started doing mine, that was probably 2003. It felt a lot like virgin territory because I didn't really know of anyone else doing it. There may have been, but I didn't know about them.
I still don't know of anybody else doing it.
Yeah, there's a couple people are starting to post things now. People who've I did a webinar with Glasscraft on how to make marble runs, and in a couple of the classes I've taught. We've made marble runs, so there's a few people starting to do them, but it's once you start doing them, you realize that they're actually kind of hard to do in terms of keeping it together and not having it crack. And there's a lot of small technical details to work out, so they're not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah, no kidding. So when you started working these things out, did you start off? I mean, I would assume you started off with just doing a single track, just to figure out the process and the moves and what you're going to do for building it out.
Yeah, the basic logistics. Yeah. And then, when I would design them, I'll like a lot of times what I'll do is I'll design the overall size of it because I want something that's going to fit into my kiln, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll figure out certain elements of it in terms of the design, what I want it to look like, and then maybe where the elevator mechanism, if it's going to have one of those, where the elevator mechanism goes, how that's going to be configured, and then certain elements that I might want to have. Like if I know I want to have a loop-the-loop in it, then it needs a certain amount of space for that, and it has to have room for the lead in and the intro and the outro on it. So things like that I plan out. But then a lot of what happens in between, I try to sort of freestyle it, design something that just fills the space nicely and looks interesting.
Yeah, because it's definitely a composition for sure.
Yeah, you're composing with not just the physical form of the tracks, but also with the movement that's going to happen on those tracks.
Right.
So I'm thinking about that.
Man, it'd be kind of fun to do that with like UV marbles and a blacklight setup and just sit and stare at that thing for 3 hours.
Yeah, I'm working on a piece that's going to have that. It's actually going to be a large outdoor sculpture, and it's going to have it's mostly going to be metal, but the marbles are going to be glass, and I'm going to have some UV on there and a little bit of like some Illuminati or Lucy in the marbles, so that as they go by, they'll flash when they hit the UV section.
Neat.
Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. So the actual elevator part, because I know you have like a small little motor on there, doing your thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then it looks like the actual elevator or like a coil that you make.
Yeah, there's a couple different methods I use. The coil works pretty good. Some of the first ones I did, I had a glass coil, and I just found that was a little bit sketchy with the glass coil lifting the glass marbles up against the glass track. There's some possibility of things, it can be more difficult. So now I'll use like even a plastic spiral, or I'll use sort of a chain system that has little forks that carry the marbles up. So different methods of getting the marbles up are fun.
Yes, like I guess in terms of the amount of time it takes, I mean, do you like keep track of that kind of stuff just for shits and giggles?
Yeah, I'll keep track of how long a piece takes me. Not that that's going to be the final determination of price, but it kind of factors into it. I need to know how long I spent.
Yeah.
Because you lose track when you're actually working on the piece.
Yeah, no pun intended, right?
Yeah, right. So I'll get a rough. And people, always, it's kind of like the first thing people ask me when they see one is it's like, oh, how long did that take you? And it's not really the definitive answer to anything about the piece, but people want to know. So I like to be able to give them an answer. The marble machines, they'll take me anywhere from, a small one might take 15 hours up to something more elaborate. They can be a couple 100 hours.
Wow, yeah. So I just found the Stevenson, I think it is, or Stephenson's steam engine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was the first video I saw, 10 years ago probably on YouTube when YouTube
Oh,
first
yeah,
came
okay,
out.
so there was I think a Czech glass blower who made that.
Yeah,
It's got the little and it turns pretty fast, right?
It hauls ass. That's what when I first saw this thing,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is amazing. And he has like the plug on top and like the ball with the heat on the source on the bottom, and it's some kind of, I think like you're saying, it might be like, I think the material that he's heating it with has like a kerosene or some kind of something in the cloth.
I think those are those little tablets that it's kind of like sterno. They use those for model steam engines. Actually, they're like little fuel pellets. And so when you scale stuff down like that, and like any model of a steam engine, you have to increase the RPMs in order to keep the thing going, just because of the physics of things. So I like to make my pieces a little bigger and have a bigger flywheel on there. So it has, I like it when they can turn sort of at a more stately speed, so that it's, you can kind of contemplate it. It's a little scary, the small one, when it goes so fast.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's a cool demonstration. He's done an excellent job of fabricating. I don't think he meant it as a gallery art piece. I think it was meant as a kind of a demonstration of the steam engine and look at what I can do. So it's very cool what he's done. But yeah, I like to make mine a little bigger and more elaborate, and so you can kind of see the mechanism and contemplate it a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it's like a water wheel, whatever those things, like a paddle wheel, like on a
Yeah.
for creating electricity or whatever. I like that
Mhm.
slow motion where you can really, like you're saying, really see it and kind of get into it and meditate on it per se. In a sense.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah,
appreciate
exactly.
that. But yeah, seeing this piston and this thing going, like I remember seeing this thing and I'm like listening to it, like it's just click, 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 click,
Yeah.
click, and it just gets faster and faster. And this glass on glass thing going on, I'm like, man,
Yeah. So when if you're gonna do glass on glass, it has to be real precisely engineered. And the guy's obviously a scientific glass blower and has access to all kinds of great equipment for making things in a very precise fashion.
yeah, yeah,
And I like to engineer things so they're a little bit funky, so that like I don't have so much glass on glass. I've got bushings that are either plastic or metal, and then the end of the cylinder, I'm using an expanded Teflon material on there, so it can slide back and forth and be and not have friction be an issue. And also, it's got a little bit of wiggle room, so that if things aren't lined up exactly right, it still functions and it's okay.
hmm
Whereas if everything's super precise, if something gets off a little bit, it can make the whole thing shatter.
yeah. I could imagine. So I would assume just like in the vibration alone of it could potentially
Yeah,
cause issues, of torquing and tweaking it.
yeah.
So when you started doing this kind of work, like the networking, I guess in a sense, and all the bridging, did you just kind of find a way to figure that shit out yourself, or was there somebody behind you? Because I know you said like you did like like somewhat of an apprenticeship with a scientific glassblower, but
Yeah, it wasn't any kind of a formal apprenticeship. I mean, he would show me a thing or two, but I was mostly kind of doing my thing and he was doing his thing. So I learned a lot by osmosis.
mhm.
Um, that was old Harry Olson at Princeton University. He's long since retired. Mike Souza is the glassblower at Princeton now, and he does a lot of postings for himself on Facebook and
Yeah.
also the American Scientific Glassblower Society, because he's sort of in charge of their web presence. He's a great guy. He's got a lot of good information, very helpful.
Man,
Um,
I had him on the show last year, and
oh, okay, cool, yeah,
yeah, when him and I
right,
first talked, I told him, I was like, hey, bro, I got 15 minutes to chat real quick, and I was at work, and I was on my break, and I told him, I was like, I have 15 minutes. He's like, that's all you got? I said, yep, 15 minutes. And 45 minutes later goes by, and I'm like, oh man, I haven't even clocked back in from break. So we were kind of laughing
yeah,
about it. But man, he's like just like yourself, you talk to certain people that you can just tell have this just deep driving passion for what they do, and he's one of them. He loves glass, no matter what it is.
yeah.
I mean, if he could
And he
marry it,
knows like everything about it too.
yeah, it's incredible, right? Like
So, so knowledgeable.
yeah, I want to
Yeah.
bring him on for like a MythBuster type episode to talk about
Oh,
the,
that would be great.
because there's so much bullshit out there that people say that just, you know how it is. And like he even said, he's like
I'm,
everything that goes wrong is devitrification, right? That's what everybody thinks. It's all devitrification.
uh,
That's like maybe like 1% of the issue.
yeah, it's part of it, but yeah,
Yeah, so that's kind of
yeah.
stuff
I
we're
mean,
going to talk about.
I'm glad people finally stopped saying diacrylic. For a long time, people were talking about
I,
diacrylic glass.
Yeah, dude, I know, it's so funny. I would see it spelt that way too, and I'm like, oh my god. I mean, I've been corrected myself on spelling it the wrong way back in the day, and I no longer do that. But or even trying to spell borosilicate the right way.
Oh yeah, yeah, borosilicate. Yeah, there's so that was kind of when I was doing my books. That was part of my mission, to try and clarify some things and get people using. Well, like we were talking about before the show too, a little bit, using proper terminology and
hmm
communicating with people and knowing what's really going on. My next mission is to get people to use the word viscous properly,
Nice.
because viscous means something is thick and syrupy, But sometimes people will use it the opposite. So they'll talk about a glass that's really soft, and they'll say, "Oh, this glass is so viscous,"
Yeah.
when really that's means it's not viscous if it's very soft. Like if you're using I don't know if you've ever tried any of the Japanese glass like satake.
No.
Ever tried that stuff?
No.
That stuff is crazy. It's the COE on it is like 120 or something. But a lot of the Japanese bead makers use it, and they use it for core forming and stuff. But it's very soft, very soft. You use just a propane air flame for it a lot of times, and so drippy. It's like hard to keep track of. But yeah, so that's glass that is not viscous, as opposed to something like, boro, when it's starting to cool off, becomes very viscous. It's very stiff.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever get into the triple blown conversation?
Oh yeah, triple blown. Yeah, that's great. I've played it 3 times. Right?
God, I hate that shit. Yeah, it's.
But it's a lot of glass blowers. They go straight into glass blowing from high school or something. Right? Some of these guys even drop out of school. I think it's good to complete high school.
Yeah,
definitely.
At least. Yep.
But a lot of people, they get into it and they don't have a lot of educational background, and they're kind of figuring it out as they go along. But yeah, I think it's good to learn the terminology, and so you can communicate with other people and take each other seriously.
Yeah, it's like my roommate. He's my student apprentice, and which is how I became his roommate after my divorce. And he was like, "Yeah, man, I need some of those gong joints." I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And I knew what he was saying, but I kept like giving him like the shit about it because he kept calling him because he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. He just thought that was like a brand name. And then I was like, "You mean glass on glass?" He's like,
yes.
What do you mean? I'm like, "Gong, it's glass on glass." And he's like, it was like a light bulb moment for him,
Okay.
It was so
funny
because he thought it was like a brand name or something like that,
Right.
Or he's like, "I need Vista bowls." I'm like, "Dude, I just tell me what size you need and I'll just order it for you." That's so funny. So that being said, in the educational space, since we're there, transition-wise, what was the initial inspiration for you to get into writing your contemporary books? Actually, let me back up real quick because before we get into the books, I was wanting to ask you if you understand or know or whatever, because everybody has this different story of the term lampwork and the origins of the lampworking term. I've heard a couple different variations. Do you have a version of it, or do you know like the true underlying story of the term?
Of course, what I think is true, of course, but
hey, man, you're the guy that wrote the book.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that originally it was with the really soft glass. This is before people even had borosilicate. They were literally using oil lamps, and you can pump a little air through there, like either with a foot bellows or even just blowing through a little tube to get an extra jet of air going into the flame and make it a little bit hotter. So they were literally using oil lamps. And in other languages like German, the lamp and torch, that's like almost the same word. They can be used interchangeably. So, and even among scientific glassblowers, they'll refer to a torch as a lamp sometimes. So the term lampworking evolved out of that originally they were using little oil lamps, and then the torches, even after they weren't using oil anymore but were using gas, in some cases were still called lamps, referred to that way, and some people called them torches. And it's, nowadays people refer to their torches as torches, occasionally as lamps, maybe in Europe or something. But sometimes people will get all upset about whether you should call it lampworking or flameworking or torchworking or warm glass or different things. And I don't care too much what people call it, except that I wrote these books and I chose lampworking as the term. So
right, that's why I brought it up. Yeah,
I'm not going to change.
Yeah,
I mean, if I'm somewhere like Penland, where they refer to it as the flame shop, I'll refer to it as the flame shop. But
right,
I tend to call it lampworking. And
yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you, because that's like, to me right now in my little space of education is trying to find the right term, because I have an online course I'm in beta test right now for, and I've got 3 students, and it's the Flameworking Institute is what is the kind of part of the moniker for it. But I'm a very traditional, in a sense, kind of person with everything that I do, and I wanted to stick with the lampworking moniker, but give it a little bit of a modern twist to it with the pipe industry. And I'm not teaching pipes right now. It's all just beginning how to manipulate borosilicate type stuff. Really good foundational techniques. But it's like going back and forth. It's like, should I call this lampworking? Because not everybody's going to understand what lampworking is, but then not everybody's going to know what flameworking is. So it's like, and I don't want to call it glass blowing because it isn't glass blowing. It's like, right. I get in the argument with people like, why is this called hand blown glass? My hand is not blowing anything. Like,
Right.
You know what I
There's
mean?
that too, for sure.
It drives me nuts.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it used to be that, when you said lampworking, a lot of people thought you were making stained glass lamps.
Exactly.
But actually, that's not as much the case anymore. It still happens, but it used to be no one had any idea what lampworking was. But nowadays, if I'm like at an art show or something, and people look at my stuff, they go, "Oh, this is lampworking, huh?" It's like they'll volunteer the term because they've heard it enough.
Yeah, I
So
love
I
that.
think people just get more educated, and
Yeah.
it gets around.
Yeah, because I get that all the time. Like I get people asking me because in one of the stores I work at, Susan, who I share the space with, she does all of our jewelry, and Susan Matsuka, I think is how you say her last name. But anyways, she's a phenomenal bead maker. Like some of the stuff she does, just I don't even understand how she does it. I make a mess when I'm using Moretti or some kind of soft glass of some sort, or I burn the color out. But people come in and I hear like the women talking about her beads, like, oh, look at, they're all lampwork beads. But then they ask me what I'm doing or what the technique or whatever the trade that is I'm doing, and I tell them, well, there's lampworking or flameworking, and I say, most lampworking is considered to be like bead making and mandrel work or soft glass on a torch type of stuff, and then we have the flame workers. So to me, it's like the lampworking is for women and the flame working is for men. It's like a feminine and masculine kind of terminology, which it's kind of how it comes across to me from the guests. So it's kind of that's what I want.
It may be that people relate to it that way, sure. But I mean, like I said, I still use lampworking all the time.
Yeah.
But it's not. I'm not on any kind of campaign to correct people. It's going to be, that term's going to be around for a while. Sometimes some people have like tried to wipe out the term lampworking because it's confusing, and it's not going away.
No.
I mean, it's literally in. I saw some import, or it was some import export form that I had to fill out for some government thing. I was shipping something somewhere, and it had a category for various types of glass except lampworked, and that was its own category.
Interesting.
So like once that term, if that term's entrenched in government bureaucratic paperwork, it's going to be there for a long time.
It's official. Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Awesome. Well, that being said, let's move into the book. So so what initially got that inspiration going for yourself?
Yeah. So, partly because I felt I had learned a lot from books. It seemed like a good thing to put forward. But the first lampworking class that was at Pilchuck, because I'd taken a few classes up at Pilchuck, and it's a big glass school up in Washington, and they really didn't have lampwork classes. The first one they had there was in 1983. It was taught by a couple of guys from Germany, the Molnar brothers, and the De La Torre brothers were there, and Brian Kirkfleet was there, and Fred Burkhill wasn't in the class, but he was taking another class. So there were a number of lampworkers there who are now more established in the field. But we were talking about how there really wasn't much information available on lampwork that wasn't sort of outdated. There was some stuff from the 60s, and there was stuff that was kind of like, how do you make spun glass wishing wells and unicorns and things. And so it became kind of clear that we needed a text that was going to present lampwork or flamework technique in a more contemporary light that wasn't tied to a particular style, but something a little more neutral. And I had already been taking some notes myself, for my own research. And I just got, I got a bug in my ear or hair in my butt, however you want to say it, about doing a book. And Pilchuck had a little library there, so I exhausted whatever materials they had that had anything about lampwork. And then I just started doing more research, libraries, different universities and different places I was at. And we didn't really have the internet at that point. There wasn't much of an internet. So I did it the old school way, through looking at books and magazines and just compiling information, and did a couple of pre-publication versions that were sort of beta testing my ideas of how to put the information out and how to organize it. And and Brian Kirkfleet was teaching a class at Penland in lampwork glass. So I got in with him on that class and helped he gave me some good input of how to refine the book, and Shane Farrow was there, and hung out with him, and just cross-referencing with a lot of different artists how to put the book together. And I realized it was good to have, not just have it be a book about me and my technique, but to sort of look at what other people were already doing out there and different techniques that were available, and just to show people the wide variety of what lamp work could do. So that was the initial inspiration for the book, and it hit at a time right when people were hungry for it. Glass bead making was starting to take off then, and the pipe movement was really starting to expand then. I mean, I didn't start it or anything. It was started by Bob and a bunch of other people who were making things happen. But it was a good time for my books to come out and be a source of information, and give people the right information to help them set up a studio that wasn't going to blow up on them and things like that. And also to get some technical information about how to anneal glass properly. There's still a lot of myths out there about annealing, what you need to do for annealing, and what works and what doesn't. There's actually mathematical formulas that were developed by engineers who had actually studied this stuff for a long time. So that's what's in my books. I tried to draw in all those sources of information and make it be, somewhat authoritative. Not that there isn't more information to be learned besides what's in my books, and I'll be doing more books eventually. But yeah, just to have it be a good reference for some best practices to some extent.
Yeah, well, it seems to be the go-to standard textbook in a sense for classes. My friends that have Zen Glass, Dave, he taught through Eckerd College he was able to teach their students. Eckerd College is a private college locally here, and the students there, they're like the hippie kids, quote unquote, that can go there and create their own thing. And they would, yeah, exactly. And part of their class they could take was a beginning glass blowing class or flameworking or lampworking, whatever the hell we want to call it. And Dave, hey, had your books, and that was part of the requirement. And the first thing he always had to make was to make their name, to write their name and their signature in glass, as a really beginning to learn how to manipulate borosilicate, understanding welds, etc. And
it's a great exercise.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I completely agree. I get people at work asking me all the time for it, and we have guys that have been with us for 22, 25, 30 years that refuse to do names anymore just because they've done so many. And it's also not easy to do. It's not an easy thing to write a signature in glass.
It's easy to screw up,
Yeah, big time.
First of all, if you're trying to copy someone's signature specifically, that gets to be a real challenge. But even just to make letters look nice and smooth, it's tricky.
Yeah, trying to dot an I, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but you have to support it somehow.
Yeah, exactly. But and it's cool, man, because when it comes into educating yourself and reading, I completely agree with what you're saying about doing research, because you can spend hours upon hours on a torch and really screwing things up and breaking glass and really trying to figure things out. But if you can sit down and read and study and look what other people have done and get some kind of educational understanding on paper first before you even go anywhere near your torch, then you can sit and contemplate the work. You can take notes, give your own perspective on it. And it brings me to my buddy Mark, who was actually my first apprentice. And you know how we are when we start blowing glass, we think we're the best glass blower on earth and want to have 20 students. But he was I was a year into this, and he was my first guy. And about 6 months into it, he used to work for a wood manufacturing company that made chairs, and managed to cut the tip of his middle finger off. And so he couldn't do anything for almost a year as he had to heal. But he bought your books, and he would go online and research, and he read and researched, and he'd buy glass that came in he still has pounds of Draconis colors that nobody can even find anymore, you know what I mean? And but when he got to be on the torch, he didn't miss a beat. He had not taken any time off because he just kept himself immersed in borosilicate or in glass in general. And it's it's just so important. It's you have to be obsessed with this type of material if you was something that you want to do for a living, or even a hobby necessarily. But if it's something like a career-wise, you really got to educate yourself. And like you're saying, you need to understand the formulas, because for the annealing process back in the day, you know how it was. We had 4 colors, 6 colors, 12 colors when the amber purples and stuff started coming in. And now the way the palette is, there's so many things that I used to get away with that I cannot get away with now, because I still am trying to learn this new medium that we have in this new color palette. And even the companies are trying to understand their nailing processes and how this color should be worked.
Yeah, and as the color palette is expanded, you're also stretching the other properties of the glass. To get those nice colors, you're playing with the COE a little bit, and COE is the coefficient of expansion is one of the it's like the main thing that determines compatibility, but other stuff can factor in there too. The way the different properties of the glass can affect whether it's really going to work together properly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it gets it's very exciting to have all these other colors and stuff, but also can be a little sketchy sometimes with all the different things you just have to experiment and try things out.
Yeah,
really.
Absolutely. Well, I even know like you're going back to the hot shop and with the colors, it's amazing when like I'm using like a copper ruby over cobalt or some kind of weird thing like that, and I make my ornament or my pumpkin and the whole thing is completely smooth and looks beautiful, and then I pull it the next day and it's rough and textured where that color, the copper ruby on the outside, was actually removing itself in a sense from the glass, or the cobalt shrunk and it just left the ruby behind. Or there's just different weird variations that you get in this color, and just because of the different metals and the oxides and the stuff that the chemicals that are in the glass, they don't work with each other well, and you can see the properties as some things shrink, some things expand, some things don't. It's just, and I'll never forget the time I had some soft glass. I didn't even realize it was, and I made a marble and the whole outside of it was completely shattered, but the object on the inside was perfectly fine. And because I had coated the outside in soft glass, and I didn't realize what I was doing, But it was a kind of an F up I did, but it was a neat experiment at the same time. That once I saw it in the kiln, just completely spiderwebbed and shattered, but it was still intact.
Yeah, that's how we learn.
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah. So that being said, have you contemplated? Because I know you have 3 of these books now, and as you began the transition from 1 to 2 to 3, I actually haven't seen number 3 yet and read it yet in person.
Oh, yeah.
Which I need to
check it out. Yeah.
So what did the third one cover?
The third one is it's first of all, it's prettier than volumes 1 and 2 because I learned a little bit about book layout and also decided to spring for full color printing throughout the whole thing.
Nice.
So it's prettier to look at, but it's also a little more philosophical in that I talked more about some theory. Like there's a whole chapter on drawing inspiration from nature. So I talk about how to compose things based on natural inspiration and natural proportion, and how that fits into design, how to make your stuff look better by using natural kind of proportions in the design. And even got into some real specifics with some stuff from AGI about anatomy, like male and female anatomy and proportions of different joints in the body, and how do you really make your figures look like a real figure instead of an alien. If you're making an alien, it's fine if it looks like an alien. If you're making a person and it looks like an alien, that's not so great.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so what exactly are those proportions? There's different systems for measuring that. So I talk about some of that and just different ways of making, relating your glass compositions, your designs to nature so that when people see it, it's like convincing. You make a tree that is a convincing tree, not just a bunch of sticks together and say, oh, look, it's a tree. So there's some of that. And then there's a whole chapter on the kinetic glass, a big section on marble tracks, and then talk about other techniques for making different kinds of joints and pivots and how do you put them together to make the kinetic glass, and some of the history of kinetic sculpture. And there's some updated health and safety info, a bunch of stuff, references that Henry Grimmett put together.
Cool.
Is in there. And then some of my travel, like there's a chapter on AGI, the Art Glass Invitational, that's been happening out in Pennsylvania, and then a trip to Japan that I did. So there's some stuff about Japan. There's some stuff about Murano and Lauscha, different places in Europe that I went to, some of the traditions that are going on there. So stuff like that. It's there's some stuff that would definitely be considered more advanced than the earlier books. And then there's also some stuff in there that like you can relate to as a beginner. You just have to jump in right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Heck yeah. Yeah, man. And that being said, taking inspiration from nature, I love that concept because I'm the same way. Like I have a medical background, so I have an understanding of human composition as well.
Yeah.
And which helps, and also having an art background too. And it's interesting now working with Disney and their proportions for the characters that I make, and it's, totally
Probably
different
needs to be pretty exact, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, they have to be exact. Yeah, and like your average character,
Otherwise it's not Mickey.
right? Yeah, exactly. But the characters are usually 3 heads tall, and so once I understand that, I can make my things look proportionally like they're supposed to. But getting into a human figure, humans are 8 heads tall. Is that right? I'm thinking
Usually 8. Yeah, 8 to 11. Yeah.
Yeah, and we all know what a freaking human being looks like. So it's like if you don't make a human, and I think it's why people stay away from making faces, because we all know what a human face looks like, and it is very, very difficult to duplicate what a human face looks like without. And you can do a simple generalized form of it, but when you start adding eyes and teeth and mouth, and it can get pretty crazy out there. And for myself, with my own work, I have characters I've been making and drawing my whole life, and I'm starting to add and make those into glass now, and they're animated looking, but they're still human in a sense. So I'm at a point right now trying to figure that shit out myself.
It's a great exercise to try to make a face that's either realistic or just a face that's an expressive face where all the parts are in the right place, because it really shows you whether you're perceiving the thing you're trying to copy properly. Some people, there's a furnace glass worker, Martin Yanetsky, who does incredible these faces and figures. They're like so lifelike. And it's because he's not only a good glass blower, but he's also a sensitive artist and has really studied faces. And he probably does a lot of drawing too, or has done a lot of drawing. So I always tell people if they're trying to make something that looks realistic or a nice figure, it helps to practice drawing. Like if you can draw it, like you were saying about figures, characters that you've come up with, if you can draw it, your chances of being able to execute it 3-dimensionally are much greater, because you've studied all those proportions and you know what goes where.
Yep.
And if you start to drift, then you have a reference point to come back to.
Yeah, exactly.
So drawing is just a really great exercise for any artist, just to draw things.
Yeah, and that's how I work. Like my ex-wife, one day she pointed out that to me, and she found that when I sit and draw my stuff before I make it, instead of just jumping into making it, it not only is it easier on me to make the stuff, but it also comes out more or less what I'm looking, for it to come out as. I'll engineer it in my head first and then go to paper, which again goes back to my love of engineering and architecture and that kind of stuff. And then I go into the glass. And a lot of times in my glass, I'll do a clear sketch first before I try to make something in full color, just to figure out the process and the moves and the steps, and it's a fun and challenging concept to do that. But I know a lot of glass blowers that can't even draw a stick figure, but then you put them behind a torch and give them some glass, and they're making the next Mona Lisa. It's amazing.
Yeah, that happens too. But if you're not one of those, then drawing's real helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think anybody and everybody should go take, even if it's like at a community center, just go take a basic intro to drawing. And
absolutely. Yeah, a lot of towns, a lot of places there are drawing groups.
Yep.
Either professional or amateur artists who just to get together. They each pitch in a couple bucks to pay the model to stand there for an hour or whatever, and everybody does their drawing. And it's just really instructive. It's really useful.
Yeah, I think it helps too in terms of like getting in a good flow state when it comes to glass, because you're not sitting there just trying to think of the process. You're just able to already have an understanding of where you're going, what their final product's going to be, with your reference there in front of you, potentially, if you have the ability to draw it out. And then you can just turn on your jams or your whatever you're going to do and your torch, and then just get into it and just leave your body for an hour or two or whatever. And I'm sure you've been there, that state of, you come out of it.
Oh, yeah, I try to get there as often as I can.
Yeah, man, it's beautiful, isn't it?
When you're doing it for a business, you don't always get to be in that state every day necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Try to get there as often as I can.
Yeah, it's amazing when you come out of it. You're like, where the hell am I at? Oh yeah, I'm in my studio. Kind of thing. It's amazing. I love it, man. It's just such an odd, unique, human experience that as an artist. I mean, there's other ways of getting there as an artist, whether it's a musician or whatever. But as a glass artist, it's a whole different to me. It's a whole different experience, because you have all this bright shit going on in front of you, and when you get that tunnel vision, it's like everything else around you just goes completely black and darkened out, except for what is right there in front of you going on, and it's hot and it's bright and you're focused, and
Yeah, glass is just an amazing material that way. It's like nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, we're blessed, man, aren't we?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day. It's like I was in the middle of feeling stressed out about something I was trying to do with a deadline or whatever, and then the stress just kind of broke for a minute, and I was like, it's a real privilege to be able to work with glass this way because it's just such a magical material, and people look at it and they have no idea what it is, what's going on, how it's made. And it's like being part of a secret esoteric brotherhood or something where we get to blow glass and study these things.
Yeah. Yeah, kids always ask me at work, like, how'd you learn how to do this? Or how are you doing that? I'm like, oh, I went to Hogwarts. And they understand.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. I'll have to try that sometime.
Yeah, man, it's funny stuff. I love it. It's such a unique thing. But something I was wanting to ask you too about the nature and stuff. Like when I was first learning the drawing process, our teacher would have us go sit outside and just draw a tree or draw the clouds, or and very similar to drawing. And you can make something photorealistic, but when you're going out and just doing like gestural drawings or trying to understand proportion, a lot of it's just fast sketching and representational. And I find glass is very similar, where I think probably the majority of glass artists out there make things that are more representational than they make realism, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And for myself personally, I try to strive for the realism side of things. Like if I'm going to make a horse, I want to make it look like it's about to run off my table, or an octopus like it's crawling around on my bench, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And years ago, which is where I'm kind of heading here, is I was introduced into the Blaschka glass family from Harvard.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah, those are amazing.
Yeah, like completely blown my mind. Like when I saw, I haven't seen it in person yet, and I've got to go see it, but just the process of these generations of family that died with their secrets in a sense, and to create these works of art. And I know there's some glass paint in there and there's different things, but I mean, do you have any knowledge of the history of that family or their creations in a sense?
Yeah, it was the father and son, and I don't know if anyone further back was a glass blower, but I know that father and son worked on those models. And there's a quote I read somewhere that somebody asked the Blaschkas, how the hell do you make these things? What's your secret? And they just said, oh, well, we have tact. We have tact. So just meaning they just have the touch. They pay attention to the detail and do it. A lot of stuff. This may be true of a lot of things. If you look at ancient artifacts and stuff, like how the hell did people make that thing? And I think some of it is that people didn't have the internet and television to distract them from focusing on something.
Yeah.
It's like they did pour their whole passion into being able to make that sculpture and make it right and make it nice. And their perception was honed in on doing it right. Whereas one of the downsides of our modern technology is we get so much input and so much stimulus that it can become harder to focus to the degree where something becomes, where your full passion is in it and on it, and it evolves into something that's excellent. We sort of, as creative people, we hear these myths and stories about, oh, so and so is such a genius, they just whip out this artwork, and that becomes it's sort of glorified in a way that makes us think that, oh, well, that's what doing art is about, that you just come up with this genius inspiration and you just whip it out, and isn't that great? And that might make good television, it might be cool in a documentary, but really, people who are doing that amazing, cool work, they also spent an amazing long amount of time slugging away at just developing their art form and noticing what's good, what works really well, and what doesn't, and training themselves to not be in denial. I talk sometimes to students about denial as, it ain't just a river in Egypt, right? It's like
exactly
the difference between making an octopus that just like, okay, yeah, it's got 8 legs, great, I guess that's an octopus, versus like you were talking about, something that looks like it's about to slither off the table, even though it's obvious that it's made of glass or stone or wood or anything else. But it has this quality that makes it, you think it might slither off the table.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that difference? And there's something about the attention that the artist is paying to it, the passion they're putting into it, but also noticing what's right and what isn't about it. Like if you're trying to make a realistic octopus, there are ways that an octopus will move, and you should make the gestures of your octopus correspond to the gestures that a real octopus would make. How do their tentacles stretch out? What's the radius of curvature of an octopus's tentacle, really? What is the diameter relative to the length, really? So, I'm using this as an example, not that everyone needs to try to make a realistic octopus, obviously, or even to make things realistic. But one of the things I talk about in the nature chapter in volume 3 is like, what makes something convincing? Mm-hmm. What makes it true to life, even if it's something that doesn't exist in the real world? You could be making some crazy alien that doesn't exist, but you can do it in a way that is convincing and a way that is not convincing.
Yeah, exactly.
So a 6-year-old kid might make a little clay octopus that, isn't very convincing when you look at it, because they don't have the motor skills, they don't have the powers of observation, they don't have, they haven't studied what makes an octopus an octopus. Now they bring that little octopus that they made home and they show it to their mother, and their mom quick figures out that it's an octopus because it has 8 legs, or maybe it's got 7, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
And the mommy goes, "Oh, honey, that's a great little octopus," and the mother is willingly suspending her disbelief in order to appreciate the octopus that her kid made. And she's appreciating many things about that octopus that have nothing to do with whether it looks like an octopus or not. The fact that it's her kid who made it, the fact that he cared enough to bring it home and give it to her, because he loves his mom, and the fact that he was having fun doing it, and that he thinks octopuses are cool, and this is the best he can do, and he's only 6 years old. All these things factor into her appreciation of that octopus. So even though you look at it, you or I might look at it and go, yeah, right, that's an octopus, okay. She's appreciating it and enjoying it tremendously because of what it is. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to have a large audience for your artwork and be appreciated and respected, then you need to realize what's the difference between, someone who's willing to suspend their disbelief when they look at that octopus and someone who isn't. So if you're willing to suspend your disbelief and that kid's octopus, you'll probably enjoy it as much as the mother did. You see even if it isn't a very good octopus, it has a certain vigor in it. When little kids do their artwork, mm-hmm. It's like they are into it. Yeah. As Harry Chapin put it in one of his songs about a kid, is like, a dancing boy. You may not have great rhythm, but you sure got style.
Yeah.
And there's that present in the artwork of children. But if you want to make an octopus that anyone, anywhere will look at it and go, wow, that thing looks like it might slither off the table, there's a whole different process you have to go through. And a lot of that process is about seeing where you're in denial and getting out of denial. Like, what's the difference between what you're doing and what your goal is? You have to be realistic. And it's a hard thing. I always like to encourage beginners to pursue their art and to keep going, and to develop it to a point where it is something that anyone would look at and say, wow, that octopus is going to slither off the table. But that it takes time to do that, and it takes the willingness to get out of denial. And if you're trying to make a living right away off of your glass, it's hard because there's a certain amount of funkiness that you might be able to sell. Someone might buy that octopus as a cute octopus.
Yeah.
But it's not the one that looks like it's going to slither off the table.
Right. Exactly.
And frankly, when I was making a lot of glass animals, I was going for the cute thing. We had a little octopus, and it had 8 legs, and it had cute eyes that are not really where an octopus's eyes are, and it was much more cartoony than a real octopus, but people loved it. They're like, oh, it's an octopus. Isn't that great? And that was its function. Its function was to make people go, oh, isn't that cute? I want to buy it, or I'm going to give this to so and so. And that's its. If you're working for Disney doing animals and cartoon characters, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
It needs to, and that's why those figures are 3 heads tall as opposed to 8 heads tall, right?
Yep.
The bigger the head is in proportion to the body, that creates a certain kind of cuteness that people respond to emotionally.
Yep, like a baby.
And that's what. Yeah, exactly. That's what you're going for.
Yep.
So, if it depends on what you're trying to do, and it's good just not to be in denial about what you're making. I mean, sometimes I'll get students who are like, yes, I want this to be like a totally realistic, amazing thing. And they're just not up to it. And they're just not paying attention on a level that will get them to be up to it. And that can be okay, if that's really what you want. But denial is something you have to watch out for, no matter what you're doing. And it's a continued process, getting better all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it kind of goes along with, like myself, I've been playing guitar since I was like 7 years old. And I say playing guitar because I can't read music hardly, but I can play the guitar. I can play just about any instrument I pick up and play. But
sure,
I'm a glass artist. I'm not a musician. And then the difference of the two, because I don't sit and practice my skills, but I have probably pulled 250,000 or more points in my life, and I understand how glass moves because I've done that. Or when I learned how to do dolphins, and I know a dolphin has a specific look to its tail, I spent 2 fucking weeks completely. I mean, it was probably one of the most frustrating things in the last 5 years I've had to learn how to do, was making a stupid dolphin tail look symmetrical. And
I talk about, actually, in volume 3, I use this difference, like the dolphin tail and a shark tail. I don't know if you've ever seen a glassblower do a dolphin that has a shark tail on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's going vertical instead of horizontal.
Yeah. It's like you have to kind of study a little bit to notice those things. So the example you bring up is perfect.
Yeah, and I'm blessed in my situation where I'm at, because I have sent my manager emails before being like, dude, I feel terrible sitting here being paid to just throw this shit away all day. And he's like, dude, we're paying you to understand this glass and this medium and know your work. So when you get to a point to sell this product, you're going to, and I made my dolphins look like they're jumping out of the water now. Like I'm making these waves with these dolphins jumping out of the top of the waves. But to get to that point, I went to, we had the Living Seas over at Epcot, which is one of the places I'm usually at. And I literally will go in there and I'll spend an hour and take a piece of paper and pencil and go in there and study the manatees and draw the manatees and watch how they move and watch how their nostrils move and how they interact with each other. And then I go and watch the dolphins do the same thing. And there's so many little weird proportions. Like I always thought the dolphin's dorsal fin was like in the middle of its back. Well, really, it's actually closer to its tail than it is to its eyes. And you can tell the difference when you actually put it in the right place. And there's so many times where I go to add that dorsal fin, and I'm like, whoa, that's not in the right place. I have to rip it off and move it back a little bit. There's little idiosyncrasies. Yeah, I guess now I know the proportions of it. And
that's what the Blaschkas did too. The Blaschkas, when they were working on their models, they did a lot of observation out in the field. I mean, they got dead specimens to look at, but they also went out and they looked at things, in nature to see what they're really doing. How when this plant is growing, what angle are its leaves really at, relative to the sun and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All those things really bring things to life in a different, on a higher level. And again, it doesn't have to be something that even really exists, but when you study nature and then you go to make some rendering of some kind of creature, then you notice whether it's convincing or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you get into like the H.R. Geigers of the world and those guys that are making these, biomechanical creatures that you swear to God exist because it looks like the way that they function because he understands that kind of property of mechanicals and stuff. It's so fascinating. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think a lot of artists are so quick to just go to the studio and they got bills to pay and they got to make their money. Instead of understanding that if they just took the time to be aware, to pay attention, to study, draw, practice, whatever, even if you're sitting in front of your TV doing it, it doesn't matter. But as long as you take that time out of your day or whatever to practice the process of thinking outside the box or thinking how things actually function and work, I mean, like a clothespin, for instance, it's such a simple little thing, but someone had to sit and engineer that to make it work properly with a spring.
Yeah.
It's always
And
fascinating.
probably a lot of trial and error and different iterations going into it.
Yeah. Well, like the light bulb. I mean, it was like a 1,000 different times or more than that to figure out the right paper that he had to use to make that work.
Yeah, tried a lot of different things. For sure.
And I love that kind of stuff. Like I love watching history shows and how things are made shows or the history of certain inventions or whatever. And it's always intriguing to me and inspiring to understand that these guys, they're the 20-year overnight successes. That's what I'm going to consider myself to be. Hopefully, in the next 2 years, is after 20 years, I'll be the overnight success. But it took me 20 years to get to this point.
Yeah, because we only ever hear about the overnight success part, and that's just part of the hype about creativity and art in our culture. That if you're actually going to be an artist, you have to kind of see past all that and realize that doesn't necessarily apply.
Yeah. It's just practicing. Again, going back to the guitar, it's like if you want to be an artist or if you want to know the guitar, you got to practice your scales. If you want to be a glass artist, you got to practice pulling points or balling up glass and making little flat patties. Like there's all these little things. Practice pulling stringers. All these little nuances that go into this medium that we all love and hate and everything at the same time.
Yeah, and you have to kind of learn the rules before you can break them too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I didn't do at first. I just went and just broke all the rules, and now that we have 2,000 colors to use, I can't do that anymore.
Right.
Yeah, man. So just one other thing too, I want to touch back on your work is the kinetic work, and I've on large and small scale, I've always loved kinetic art. Whether it's 6 balls in a row, then you start hitting one ball and they all keep moving for 3 hours. Or the guys that have these big, wood sculptures that they have on the beaches that the wind powers them, type of thing. So what was your inspiration into getting into the kinetic stuff?
Well, I guess it's related to the mad scientist thing, and also it's just the notion when I made mechanisms out of glass, the way it made me feel to see glass used in this way that really people don't think of using glass this way because it's not thought of as a strong material. But it's I love the way it messes with people's heads. Like when you watch people, they go up to a machine made out of glass and it just freaks them out a little bit. I love the way it fucks with people's head to see, here's this glass mechanism and it just kind of short circuits the brain for a minute. And also aesthetically, I like watching the motion as glass parts pass in front of each other or move around each other. It's just very lovely, the play of light through the different layers of the glass as it's moving in different directions. I just find that fascinating. It's kind of like, we have that experience when we're working glass. When you're, working the glass in the flame, it's moving, it's hot, it's pieces of glass are moving in front of each other. So in some sense, I feel like the kinetic glass sculpture is giving the audience some of the experience that we have when we're working glass, because they get to see it in a different way. People think of glass as just a stationary object, but there it is moving dynamically. It's I think it just opens up people's perspective of the world.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that's what's intriguing to me too, because it's like this kind of magic thing. You walk into a room and this thing's been moving for the last 10 days, and you're like, what started this?
Yeah,
it's neat. What because I remember one of the first ones I saw was your teapot one that you did, and so when you're getting into these inspirations for these compositions, are you at a shop somewhere and you see something and you're like, oh, I'd like to incorporate that into my work, or you get these little wild hairs, or what's your inspiration for that?
Yeah, it could be something like that. But also there's sort of a tradition that was, I guess, started in England it's been around even longer than that, but more recently of automata, just little figures where it's a somewhat simple mechanism typically, but you interact with it and a figure moves, but you also see the guts of the mechanism. Mm-hmm. And it's just this very charming thing where you're taking something very simple and you're creating this feeling of life. So even though it's an inanimate object, when it moves, it's like it's a living thing in some respects. So I'm just fascinated by little mechanisms, like with the teapot, or I did something similar to that recently. That was a champagne bottle. It's you're converting one form of motion into another, like you're turning a crank, and that's converted into a different kind of back and forth motion. So to me, that's just fascinating, and it's very simple, but it opens up a big window in our perception, I think. So that's what it's about for me.
Yeah, yeah. I've always been intrigued by watches and the mechanisms of old clocks and watches and stuff, and the gears and
Yeah.
the concepts of that. And I have a couple pocket watches just because I like to see the mechanical side of things. And I've always wanted to get into doing that kind of stuff, like making gears and that kind of stuff. But I understand it isn't easy,
Right.
the process of making a glass gear. You got a saw and everything else, to
Oh
do it.
yeah. Well, glass gears. I considered doing some glass gears at one point, and just realized that it's logistically it's kind of a horror, because those little teeth are all they're subject to a lot of stress when the gear is going. So glass is very strong under compression, not so much under tension.
Yep.
Or being flexed around. I did hear about someone who made a clock entirely out of glass, like in the 17 or 1800s or something. And what they did is they cut these glass gears, and then they put a strip of brass along the entire face of the gears, along the teeth, so that when the gears rubbed against each other, they weren't scratching the glass, because that's what will make the glass break. If it just scratches a little bit, then it's a goner.
Yeah. And that's what's amazing to me about the glass itself. It's it's like stronger than a human bone, but you put the slightest little scratch in that thing, and it just throws the entire surface tension off.
Yeah. Strong under compression, not under tension.
Yeah. And isn't like fiber optics, for instance, they say, it's like stronger than steel, in terms of the pulling and tension on it, but
as long as the surface is perfect.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because one of my dad's friends, her husband or boyfriend, whatever the hell he is, when they were doing the fiber optic cables across like the whole transatlantic thing they were doing, he was one of the guys that would go out for like 3 or 4 months at a time and would weld those connections together. And he was showing me pictures of like these crazy torches that they had it was like a collar almost that would go around the connections to make sure all the things were together. And he was telling me like these fiber optic lines are like 3 millimeter diameter, but they're so stiff and strong that you could literally put it through your hand if you're not careful. And I couldn't imagine having to weld a bundle of like 5,000 strands of glass, and make sure all those connections are actually clean. And that was that was like his thing. And being on a boat doing that out in the Atlantic Ocean, on top of that, like, man, that's some serious patience. And technology wise, it's pretty neat to see that kind of shit,
Yeah.
It's fascinating. There was something else I was going to ask you. I don't remember what it was. I don't know.
About the kinetic stuff?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what it was. So with the kinetic stuff, have you gotten into anything that moves, like the walkers that the guys that do out there, like the wind-moving ones type stuff?
I've started experimenting with trying to make a Strand beast, like that artist Theo Janssen does, that walk on the beach, with the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked out parts of the mechanism. I copied his leg mechanism, but to actually put it together into a thing that will walk, I need to study the stresses in the glass more, and I actually have some 3D modeling software I've started learning. I haven't taken it to that point to figure out how to make that yet, but I've overcome a couple of technical hurdles, and I just haven't had the time to sit down and really make that happen. It'll be cool if I can carve out the time after I get some other projects done.
Yeah.
But they're really beautiful, and in glass, the motion looks really cool too.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine seeing like that on the beach, like you're saying, like seeing like the sun and the wind, everything going through. It'd be incredible.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as big as his.
Right.
Yeah. Like one of the little models about a foot tall or something.
I don't know, man. You make some pretty big stuff though. Seeing some of your marble tracks you've done, or you've done some pretty big marble
a couple
tracks.
Pretty big. Yeah, like 4 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild. I wonder if you could make like doing the 3D modeling. If you could actually use like a 3D printer to go through the process to print out all your pieces ahead of time, and then just use those as like jigs or some kind of way to scale the parts to.
Yeah, I think there's ways to do that. Certainly things can be 3D printed right off the software. Um, and I'm always sort of I sort of have a love-hate relationship with the technology because the kinetic sculptures they're very much about technology that's very immediate and you can just see right there what's going on. Um, so it's visceral. You can actually touch it and play with it. And I certainly understand the advantages and benefits of modeling stuff on a computer first, and I do some of that. But I also don't want to lose track of the direct engagement that you get by sort of designing something on the fly as you're making it. So I still have kind of a hybrid approach, I guess.
Yeah, and then I understand that completely because you really want to understand what's going on in the glass instead of just copying a piece of plastic that you just made.
Yeah.
To give you a better understanding of the process and what
Yeah.
things are going to, or how they're going to work.
Yeah, and glass does have its own, like I was saying before, it does have its own particular demands of how it behaves, and that leads to certain ways you have to work it. Oh, still there?
Yep, I sure am.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree completely. And that's the fun thing about all this. I think the experimentation process of the glass, knowing that you're going to fuck it up and possibly break it, is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Going through it. And that's like in the hot shop as I'm learning, like Charlie's always telling me, he's like, if you're, which I think is probably the most important thing I've learned in the hot shop is all about the setup, from the very beginning process. If it's off at all, your whole thing's screwed up, And
well, I tell students that all the time and at the Torch. It's like it's all in glass blowing is all in the setup.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't realize what you're setting up when you do something, which is part of the problem. It's one of those denial issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you need to realize that everything you do is setting up what's going to happen 5 minutes from now as you're working. So yeah, the setup is very important.
Yeah, for sure.
Even in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I took a class with Joe Peters and Peter Muller a couple years ago, and I kept hearing him referring to what the next move was going to be or thinking about moves, and I'd never really heard that term used, but it was actually like the second class I'd ever taken in glass blowing myself, mostly self-taught, and I never really thought about it that way in terms of it being like a chess match, and you got to think way ahead of time, like what's coming, because next thing you know, it's checkmate and the thing's in the garbage can,
Right.
You lose.
Right.
But if you can make the right moves to get from A to Z, it makes such a big difference, to have that plan of attack already ahead of you, and it just makes smooth sailing from there.
Absolutely.
I think it's a lot of fun. Well, I guess now I want to get into your pipes. Because
sure.
part of the fun thing I have found is as this industry has grown and legalization changes and functionality is what it is, I see a lot of other contemporary lamp workers that are getting into the scene. Just and I don't think they're getting into the scene because of the money that's there. I think they're getting into the scene because they realize that they can take this techniques and this art that they've been doing for so long and go a whole different direction with it in terms of it being now functional, which is completely different.
It's a lot of fun. To play with that aspect of it, and the market, as far as the business side of it, the market's kind of weird, in that it's very trend driven, and so in some respects, because I'm not full time in the pipe thing, I feel like I put myself at a disadvantage because people keep changing the fixtures that they're using, different kinds of nails or whatever for the actual smoking process, and different kinds of carb caps, and that's cool and everything. But my focus is less on, what's the trendy new technology of smoking, and more on what makes an object an interesting thing to smoke out of. And I'm interested in like the traditions of shamanism and mysticism and how those relate to people working in altered states of consciousness. So all those things really feed into what I'm interested in doing in functional glass. I'm always sort of exploring an intersection between the physical object and a mystical world maybe another dimension. And it's kind of my philosophy that a pipe should make you start to go into an altered state of consciousness before you even smoke out of it. Which I think is kind of true of all art. It should be doing something to your awareness, either with or without your consent. So to me, that's what the pipes are about. They're about exploring forms that are interesting and maybe a different kind of permission than the conventional, hoity-toity art world has. There's a different kind of permission in making something that's a pipe that, I really enjoy it. And like I said, I don't do pipes all the time. I kind of go through little periods where I'll do a few and then I'll lay off for a while. But it's a very interesting type of an object. It's an interesting framework within which to work. I think one of the things about art is that you need to create a framework for yourself, and then you explore that framework and do different things within it. But if you don't have any kind of framework, then it's hard to come up with something that's interesting because you're not pushing up against anything.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's frustrating for me in the new generations of glassblowers that come in and they just want to make a rig or they want to make a pipe or whatever. And it's, again, going back to the knowing your medium, because then you can really get your voice into it and express yourself as an artist. And I'm not going to say every glass person out there is an artist. There's some that are just in it for the money. Like I did a whole episode on why are you a glassblower? If it's just because you think it's cool, fucking sweet. But own up to that. Like, make sure that that's why you're doing it for. If you're trying to be this badass glassblower, then you need to really study your stuff. And going back to understanding the foundations, because I see some amazing work out there that's selling for $35,000 and $40,000. But then I'm hearing the guys that are buying these things that actually will use them, and the function isn't any good on it. And for me, if you're going to use it for an apparatus, I feel the function comes first. And not for everybody, perspective-wise, and I respect everybody's opinions. But for me personally, I'm all about the function. And then my philosophy is, okay, how can I take this function or take this art and make it function the way I want it to function? And I make my stuff pretty affordable. And my whole philosophy with my personal stuff is based on the whole philosophy of the Depression era and the Depression era glass. And especially in our times in the economy, I'm more for like the middle guy out there that's trying to pay bills to survive type of thing, and they can still buy some glass. And don't get me wrong, I still make stuff I sell for thousands of dollars, but it's far few in between. But it's I don't know. It's the function for me is awesome, and with your work, you're taking both concepts of your inspiration from your kinetic work and your marble tracks, and like looking at your bicycles, for instance, that you're doing. They look like they could just be sat on and rode away on. Like looks like a bicycle, but it's a functional piece. It's super neat. I would like to see you eventually do some stuff that's functional as a pipe, but also is kinetic as well. And
Yeah, I've done some kind of like that tricycle, that bike that Mickelson and I did together. That one, it's functional and the wheels do turn.
That's what I was gonna ask you.
Yeah. So it'll roll around. It's not obviously functional enough to sit on. It's but it's and it's not that scale. It's smaller, but the combination of and I've done some, like I did a marble machine that had pipes on it. It was sort of like a rack for the pipes that blended into the design. So I've done some things like that, but nothing super elaborate of integrating the two together.
Yeah, it'd be fun to see, because I can't think of who it is. I'm just trying to find them. I want to say it's Legacy Glassworks. But these guys are doing things with like little propellers. Like back in the day, I remember seeing guys that were doing like propellers in their pieces, so when the smoke would go by, the propeller would spin
under the water and stuff.
Yeah. Super neat stuff. Like when we were kids and we had like, before the freaking internet, when we didn't even have remote controls. And I mean, you go further back than that, I'm, being a little older than myself. Right. But, seeing that kind of inspiration and then seeing where things are right now, and it's like, man, it's crazy to see that type of style work, in a sense, going into the glass. in the scientific realm of things, I guess, is kind of where I'm trying to say, kind of blending all the stuff together like what you're doing and taking all these facets of concepts that you've learned, and now you're incorporating it in your functional stuff and everything else you're doing.
Yeah. It's a fun time.
That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I think I found who these guys are.
How are we doing for time?
Good. I was actually about to save a quick time to take a break here.
All right.
So good timing was. Yeah, I just realized it's like an hour 30 into it. I could talk to you forever, dude. You're easy to talk to.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Hell yeah. So, yeah, man. So that being said, let's go ahead and take our quick break now to thank our sponsors. And then we'll come back, and it'll be time for us to crash a kiln.
Okay.
This segment of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by Zen Dude Fitness. Lose 10 pounds this month by joining the Zen Dude Fitness 4-week jump rope fat loss challenge. Brandon and Dan will take you on a guided journey towards becoming the best you. Get fit, have fun, and find new ways to eat healthy while still enjoying the sweeter side of life. Just takes 20 to 30 minutes a day and no gym required. For more info and to sign up for the free 4-week challenge, go to wiseguymedia.com/ZenDudeFitness. That's wiseguymedia.com/ZenDudeFitness. All right, we're back. So this is the Crash in the Kiln round, which I'm sure you've probably done from time to time in your glass career, trying to get glass out the door quickly. And maybe not, since you wrote the book and you're trying to tell us not to do that.
I've wrapped things that were warm enough that I had to be careful not to melt the bubble wrap.
Awesome, man. Me too. Going to shops with my pipes in the Kevlar sleeve on the way to on the way there. Oh man! So this consists of 7 questions, and you can give me a 30 to 60-second answer on them and expound upon them as well. And the first question I always like to ask is if there's any living glass artist that you haven't worked with and you want to work with them, who is it and why?
Well, you mentioned Joe Peters earlier. He's someone I definitely would like to work with at some point. His stuff is so real clean technique, but also real clever, and not above having a sense of humor. So he'd be fun to work with, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a vision that's bigger than just glass.
Yeah, I agree.
Too, which is nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's fun with his work, man. When I took his class, I was actually amazed by how simple his technique is, and it really made me realize that I already know what the hell it is I'm doing. It was a nice reinforcement to build my confidence in my glass. Like I was able to clean some stuff up watching him work. Like you're saying, his stuff's very clean,
right?
But it's very thought out, but it's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And whimsy. I love it.
Yeah.
Hell yeah! What are your top 5 favorite colors in glass?
Top 5 colors. Clear is number 1.
Yep.
I like deep blue stardust.
Okay. Is
nice, and pomegranate is a nice color. I mean, it's simple, but it's I like working with it. I've used it a bunch. Calypso, which is a molten ore color, is pretty nice. I like it. It gets a little bit of copper reduction sometimes, which is really interesting if you use it in a way where that actually contributes to the piece. I like that. Aphrodisia, which is a greasy glass color, I think, is kind of cool the way it does a lot of different stuff. But I'm not a big. I mean, the cadmium colors are cool and stuff, but I'm not. And some of the neocads I have tried out. Those are pretty sweet to work with. But I guess I tend. Sometimes I like just simple colors that are just sort of flat in a sense,
mm-hmm.
that don't do anything unusual. But also I'm fond of colors that do sometimes unpredictable things and give you some variation and variegation.
Yeah.
Those are a lot of fun.
Yeah, like the old, what was it? Man, I can't. And it was a blue and a green. I can't even think what the hell it's called.
The multis, or
No, it wasn't a multicolor, but it was like an experimental color. I don't know what the hell.
Oh.
Oh, exotics, like the exotic
Oh, the
blue
exotics, yeah.
and exotic greens. Yeah, those kind of colors were the same way. You just never really knew what you're going to get. You might get a brick red reduction, or you might get some badass greens and blues out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And those kind of colors too, I find really help to understand flame property and annealing as well.
Yes, you see direct results, and it kind of gives you a different angle on looking at what you've been doing. Like you think you were doing one thing, and then it turns out, oh, the flame must have really been a reducing flame. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that being said, can you describe and explain for those that do not know or are confused what the difference between reduction flame is and a oxidized flame is?
Yeah, so it has to do with the relative amount of oxygen to your gas. So a reducing flame is one that has relatively less oxygen. And what it will do, so a reducing flame tends to be like a more soft-looking flame, might even have little hints of yellow in it. But a reducing flame will actually, because the burning fuel wants more oxygen than what you're really providing it, it will pull oxygen out of things that come into contact with the flame. So if you've got a molten piece of glass in a reducing flame, the flame will pull some oxygen out of it, and that's why you get those metallic finishes when a color reduces. It's actually metal a metal oxide that was on the surface of the glass is losing some of its oxygen, so you're just left with plain metal. So you get that metallic finish. So an oxidizing flame is the opposite, where you have high oxygen. An oxidizing flame tends to be more sharp, sometimes a higher temperature than a reducing flame, but also if you really add a lot of oxygen to the flame, it'll start cooling it down again. So you have a flame that's actually starting to become less hot as you add more oxygen. And then in between is a neutral flame. So the neutral flame is where you have the right natural balance between the fuel gas and oxygen for the most efficient burning. It's great. It's what you use most of the time when you're working clear and everything. It just doesn't yield the most interesting colors necessarily.
Heck yeah. On that same note, so Carlisle recommends you run your outside oxygen on when you're running the torch, even if you're running your center flame. And that's something that I've never done, and I haven't done it only because I've always felt that outside oxygen is hitting the glass and potentially cooling off the areas that I don't want it to cool off. Is that?
Yeah, I
do
that. I run like on any torch where you've got the multiple stages where you've got a ring, an outer fire. It doesn't take much. So it doesn't have to be as much oxygen as would actually cool the glass. You just give it a little feed, and what it does is it kind of tightens up the outside edge of the flame and brightens it up a little bit, which means it's getting hotter. So you're just feeding enough oxygen in that then gets entrained into the flame and mixes with it as it's going forward. So it's not like you have a blast of oxygen that's surrounding your flame. It's not that much.
Okay. Yeah, it's something I've always wondered, because I wasn't sure if they recommended it because of how the torch runs and it helps to maintain the torch to work longer and not burn holes out.
Well, it probably does help cool. It probably does help with cooling somewhat, but I find it just feeds a little bit extra heat into that inner flame, and it tightens up the edge of it. Yeah. So that you get a little bit more control at the edges when you're working.
Okay. I'll have to try that, because really in the last 18 years with this, I've had this Carlisle for 16 and a half years now, and if I had a foot pedal, I would have one of my outer gases turned on, just because it's easier to use your foot pedal that way. But I'll have to try that. I'll have to check it out. See how that works. What kind of differences I get in my work. For sure. So next question is, when you're in the studio, do you watch TV, listen to the radio, or do you do both?
Music. I listen to music. I don't listen to radio stations so much. But I'll listen to some music, and depending on what I'm doing, I'll really want to have music that doesn't have any lyrics. Like if I'm trying to think about something and figure it out, especially if it's technical, then sometimes lyrics could be real distracting. Or I'll play world music where they're saying something, but I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Nice. What's your worst injury in the studio?
It's hard to say. There've been so many. Uh,
Give me the
but
juiciest one.
Yeah, I've had a couple of gnarly burns, but I think maybe the scariest one I had was on my lathe. I had a broken end of a tube, like an end where I'd blown out, blown the end open and then separated it like a flame cut, and then left a chunk of glass there that was sharp, and I leaned up against it and cut my hand between the fingers. And fortunately, I didn't go down deep enough to cut a tendon or anything, but that was kind of scary.
Jesus, yeah. Did it like cut the webbing of your hand?
Yeah, a little bit there.
Yeah.
And it was very thin and very sharp, so it wasn't a nasty cut in that sense, but it was. I could see down into, you see down below into the skin. It's like, oh yeah, a little bit further, and that would have hit a tendon.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah, and that's no good, man. That's like the worst thing you can do in your hands.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't do that.
Yeah, it's terrible. I know Bear Claw a couple years ago, he was cut his hand wide open. We had like an auction thing going on to help him with his medical bills, and man, it's one of those tragic things that for an artist, like I get freaked out when I see like Yushin and his skateboard videos. I'm like, his mom, like, dude, stop skateboarding.
Right.
Makes me nervous. And it's not even me.
Yeah, but he'll never quit.
No, no, and he's a badass too.
Yeah.
Unreal. Let's see.
Absolutely.
We got got color. We got worst injury. TV. If you could describe the sound of glass cracking, whether a philosophical sound or actual sound, how would you describe it?
I would describe it as heartbreak. Sound of glass breaking is heartbreak. Yeah. So maybe it's the sound of my heart breaking.
It's the one sound I've had to get used to in the hot shop with our clean off buckets, our barrel we have.
Oh yeah. Cracking stuff off and
yeah,
throwing the blowpipe into the water. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. You have any glass blowing themed tattoos?
No, I don't have any tattoos. I have a lot of my friends have a lot of tattoos, but I've never gotten any. Just haven't gotten the bug.
Yeah, that's what it is, too.
I probably have a couple of. I have a little bit of scarification that's glass related, I guess.
Brands.
That's not really quite what you're asking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've actually talked to a couple people about having like a get together with a community or a group of people, and we could all make our own little glass something and then brand each other with it. And there's a group out there that actually does that in metal. That's like a scarification kind of thingy, and they'll sculpt out some kind of saying or a word or whatever shape in metal, and then someone brands it on them. It looks painful, but I don't know.
Well, I remember reading Thrasher magazine at one point, and there was some group of skaters, I forget who was in it, but they had what they called the Order of the Fork, and they had all branded each other with a hot fork. It probably started at a campfire or something. But yeah, they had the Order of the Fork. All these guys with little parallel lines on them.
That's funny. Did you skate at some point?
Oh, I was never very good. I tried a little bit. I mean, it was more of an. I did an underground paper called Attitude Problem. That was sort of a skate scene, but it was nonconformity was really the theme of it. It was all about supporting nonconformity.
Huh.
And skating made for great visuals, and a lot of skaters were nonconformist types anyway. So I hung out with the skate scene and actually put a ramp up at my studio for a while. But I never got very good myself. I mean, I appreciated skaters and hung out with them, but
yeah,
I wasn't very good myself. I waited till I was like 27 to start learning. It's probably kind of late.
Yeah, probably.
Your bones aren't so flexible anymore, and you know what it means when you fall down.
Oh man, it hurts.
If you're a little kid, you kind of when you're a little kid, you're kind of indestructible, and someone else pays your medical bills. But so
yeah, nowadays if I crack my knee on like a corner of a piece of furniture, I'm like out for 3 days. It's like, oh my god, Jesus.
Yeah.
Whatever. So
getting old sucks, but it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Plus, I'm glad I'm out of my 20s. I did some stupid shit in my 20s. I'm glad that's over with. And my 30s, so whatever. I'm 40 now, so hopefully it's all good from here.
Right.
So last question I'd like to ask is, what are your top 5 favorite tools that you use to work with, minus your torch and your glasses? Okay,
not including the torch. Well, I was going to say a hand torch in addition to the bench torch, because it's just really great to have. But other tools, tweezers are probably the number one tool because they do everything. all the different surfaces on the tweezers too, like using the butt end to push things around, whatever. Um, I get a lot of use out of a kote, which is a Japanese wall plastering trowel.
Okay.
A lot of the bead makers use those, but it's great. Like there's sometimes when it just works better than a paddle for getting things at a certain angle or looking at things from a certain angle. Scissors are really a great tool. Again, they're very versatile. And the Marver, of course, you just use it for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have really fancy, crazy Marvers with a lot of, V-shapers and stuff carved into them. I've had those, and I have some that I use from time to time. But even just a straight, flat Marver is just really a wonderful thing to have. And I try to keep it simple. I have some really elaborate, crazy custom-made tools, and I have some jigs and things that I use when I'm making the kinetic sculpture for creating alignments and things like that, making parts that fit together. But really, I think the simplest tools are best in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah. You ever use a spoon?
Oh yeah, spoons are great. I have some carved graphite that sort of fulfills the function of a spoon.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, spoons can be very handy.
Yeah, I agree. I asked a lot of artists, and they're like, "No, I've never used it before." And the first class I ever took was Steve Siveslove and Coyle did a class together. And Steve uses a spoon, and he just by chance forgot his spoon, and I by chance just had come in from work, and I had my tool bag in my car, so I grabbed my spoon. So I've got the Siveslove energy in my spoon right now. But
cool.
He was pumped that I had it because he said it's like one of his main tools he uses. And years ago, I set up did a demo with Mickelson down at a shop in West Palm Beach, and we were side by side, and we laid our tools out. And the only difference tools that he had that I didn't have was his blowhose and hand torch. Otherwise, it was a butter knife and a spoon and our torch. And like you're saying, It's like the simpler you are, man. I've seen guys have like a whole fucking thing they just unroll, and it's like a toolbox of shit. And it's like, dude, what are you gonna do with all this stuff?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's there's a saying among some tribe in South America, the shamans. They say that the shaman, like the medicine man who has the fewest tools in his bag, it actually reflects that he's a more powerful shaman because he doesn't need so many tools.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love nothing more when I'm making something and just using glass in my torch. It's like it's the best thing in the world.
Yeah. That's why I have that picture in the books and also those T-shirts that I sell that have the regions of the flame and their uses.
Yeah.
It's like the flame itself is really a very powerful tool if you know how to use different parts of it, how to use them.
Yeah, that's a poster everybody should have in their studio.
Yeah.
100%. Absolutely, man. Well, before I let you go here, if you could give us a little bit of parting piece of advice and then tell us where we can find you out there in the world of cyberspace.
Yeah, sure. Well, my piece of advice for beginning glass blowers is to really take the time to learn to understand what glass is and how it operates. And remember that it's a dialogue between you and the material. So don't try to be the boss all the time. You have to let the glass tell you what you need to do sometimes. And then as far as finding me, I've got a couple of websites. My general art website is bandhu.info. So that's bandhu.info. And then the site that's for my pipes specifically is zorplex.com, XORPLEX.com. And then, I'm on Big Cartel, and you can find me in different ways. I'm on Instagram. I'm at Bandhu Dunham. Twitter, which I don't use a lot, is at Zorplex. And then I'm on Facebook as Bandhu Dunham. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Heck yeah. Yeah, if you Google your name, man, you're all over the damn place.
All right.
It's fun. Zorplex, what the hell does that come from?
I just made up a word that sounded sort of weird. And, when I was first getting into pipes, I wanted to be as weird and distinctive. And it's like, I kind of wanted to have a pseudonym like a lot of pipe makers did, even though it was becoming less necessary. And I tried one for a while, and it didn't really feel natural. And Bandhu is unusual a name enough, so that I just used that. But I wanted to call the pipes something weird. So it's sort of outer space, shamanistic, multi-dimensional. If you go to zorplex.com and check out the site, I've got a little bit of a write-up about it,
Cool.
So it's just weird, and also it's kind of cool because if you Google Zorplex, I'm the first thing that comes up.
That's awesome. It makes me think of some kind of like Disney villain or something like that,
Why not?
That's what where I'm at with it,
Sure.
Cool. Hell yeah, man. We should have a competition for you, like who can come up with a character that represents this name or something.
That could be cool.
Oh, shit. Hell yeah. Cool, man. Well, again, I appreciate having you on, and like I said, I could sit here and talk to you for 5 hours and just pick your brain and talk about, you've got decades here of glass experience, especially when you're starting off as a teenager and lab sets and everything else to where you are now.
It's like 42 years now.
That's amazing. So
yeah,
cool.
I enjoyed our conversation also. So it was good talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. And just hang on. I'll say goodbye off the air here. And yes, thanks again for tuning in to episode 170 with Bandhu Scott Dunham. And you can check him out on all the interwebs. I'll have all the links in the show notes. And if you have any information for me, just hit me up at wiseguymedia@gmail.com. And again, that'll be in the show notes. And don't forget to stay tuned to the Tournament of Fire on Instagram as I'm competing in that. And we got 16 of us artists, including myself. You can go on there and vote and help us out and see who gets through the process of winning this thing, which I'm excited about. And until next time, we'll talk to you on the Wise Guy Radio Show. This episode of the Wise Guy Radio Show is brought to you by Glassroots Art Show. Now entering its 9th year, Glassroots is designed for artists and distributors who wish to do wholesale business with shops and galleries. Located at the Monona Terrace Convention Center on beautiful Lake Monona in downtown Madison, Wisconsin, the art show features at least 25 glassworkers demonstrating and creating pieces for public viewing, live and silent auctions, raffles, and approximately 40 booths consisting of raw material supplies, functional and non-functional art, and glass charitable organizations. This year, in 2017, Glassroots will be held October 9th through the 11th, and for any more information, just go to glassrootsartshow.com. That's glassrootsartshow.com. This episode is also brought to you by The Flow magazine. Since its inception, the focus of The Flow has been to provide a bond among members of the lampworking community. This has been accomplished by developing relationships with the finest artists and sharing their techniques with you through in-depth, step-by-step tutorials. In every issue, you can enjoy great content with the hottest artists and cutting-edge techniques using the latest industry products. These features, along with the continuation of our Women in Glass edition, Glasscraft Emerging Artist Awards, inspiring gallery showcases, dynamic general interest articles, as well as health and safety information, make The Flow the leading international lampworking journal. For more information or to subscribe to The Flow, go to theflowmagazine.com. That's theflowmagazine.com.